Have you ever looked at someone in power and thought, how did they end up there? Not in awe, but in disbelief. You see them at podiums, in corner offices, commanding armies or headlines, and you wonder, how did someone so transparently incompetent climb so high? It's not just a glitch in the system, it's a pattern, almost ritualistic. From history's Emperor Nero fiddling while Rome burned, to modern tech empires built on vapor like Elizabeth Holmes, there's a thread woven through the ages. It's not always the sharpest minds, the wisest hearts, or the most capable hands that rise. Sometimes it's the bold, the loud, the simple, the naively certain, the ones who don't know enough to question themselves. Machiavelli knew this, and what he saw centuries ago, we still live with today. But here's the twist. It's not just a historical accident. It's the result of psychological mechanics and social illusions designed to favor the very people we once tried to avoid. Because sometimes being smart is what keeps you stuck. Ethics can become chains, awareness a burden, and the illusion of competence, that's often more powerful than competence itself. So what if all this wasn't a mistake? What if this dynamic, where the foolish ascend, wasn't a failure of systems, but their very design? And if that's true, what does it mean for the rest of us, those still waiting in the wings? In 16th century Florence, after being exiled from the very politics he adored, Niccolo Machiavelli began writing what would become one of the most disturbing and misunderstood political texts in history, The Prince. He wasn't interested in utopias, not in how power should work, but in how it actually does. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. That sentence isn't just cynical, it's a blueprint for manipulation. Machiavelli understood something most people still can't accept. When it comes to rising in power, perception is often more powerful than truth. And this is where the paradox begins. Because when someone is actually intelligent, it shows, not through arrogance, but through caution, through complexity, through hesitation. Genuine intelligence is heavy. It carries doubt. It sees nuance. It speaks carefully. But in power structures, those very traits become liabilities. The intelligent hesitate. The manipulative don't. The intelligent see risk. The foolish promise certainty. The intelligent reflect. The incompetent project. And in a world where power rewards loudness over substance, who do you think people follow? Think of Socrates, one of the most brilliant minds of his time, sentenced to death by democracy for corrupting the youth by asking too many questions. Compare that to populist leaders, past and present, who rise by offering one-line answers to problems that require volumes. I know that I know nothing made Socrates a philosopher. It also made him powerless. Meanwhile, the people who rise aren't burdened by depth. They offer certainty. They speak in absolutes. They refuse complexity, not because they've mastered it, but because they've never seen it. And the crowd? The crowd rewards them. There's even a study Journal of Management, 2017, that found intelligence only helps with leadership up to an IQ of about 120. Beyond that, it often becomes a barrier, a curse. Why? Because highly intelligent people struggle to influence those who can't follow their thinking. They're speaking symphonies to ears tuned only to drums. So what happens to those symphonies? They're silenced or ignored or replaced by noise. So what happens when the truly competent get drowned out by those who simply sound competent? This is where psychology meets power, and where Machiavelli's dark insights begin to echo through modern research. In the late 1990s, psychologists David Dunning and Dunning-Kruger uncovered a disturbing pattern now known as the Dunning-Kruger effect. The less someone knows, the more confident they are in what they think they know. And the more someone truly understands, the more they realize how much they don't. So who do people follow? The loud one, the certain one, the one who, despite being wrong, seems right. As Machiavelli warned centuries earlier, the fool thinks himself wise, but the wise man knows himself to be a fool. Confidence, it turns out, mimics competence in the eyes of the crowd. A 2020 study in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology proved this. Overconfident individuals were consistently rated as more competent leaders regardless of their actual abilities. Think about that. The person who believes they're right, even when they're catastrophically wrong, is often chosen to lead, while the one who carefully considers their stance, reflects, and reevaluates, they're labeled indecisive. This illusion of competence explains why people like Elizabeth Holmes could build billion-dollar companies on promises that never worked, or why leaders like George Armstrong Custer, with supreme but misplaced confidence, led themselves and their followers into disaster. But confidence alone doesn't just win people over, it protects those who wield it. Because once someone projects certainty, they become difficult to question. Doubting them means doubting yourself, and no one likes that feeling. Machiavelli recognized this long before neuroscience confirmed it. The human mind is wired to mistake confidence for clarity. And in a world overwhelmed by complexity, we hunger for clarity more than truth, which is exactly how the most incapable individuals not only rise, but remain in power. And once they do something far more dangerous. They begin to build systems that protect their position by surrounding themselves with people even less capable than they are. Once incompetence reaches power, it doesn't sit still, it spreads. Machiavelli saw this play out firsthand. He warned that a weak leader surrounds himself not with the best, but with the safest. Subordinates chosen not for talent, but for loyalty. Why? Because competence is threatening. It's threatening to leaders whose positions were never earned through merit, but through manipulation, spectacle, or inheritance. This is what Machiavelli meant when he wrote, "The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him." In other words, the court reflects the king. This creates what psychologists today call a competence drought. When a leader selects only yes men, flatterers, or those too mediocre to challenge them, The entire institution begins to rot from the inside out. You've probably seen it. The boss who avoids hiring anyone smarter than themselves. The manager who punishes feedback. The organization where innovation dies the moment it threatens someone's ego. Modern research backs this up. Organizational psychologist Dr. Tomasz Chomoro-Promutzik describes this as competence-threatening behavior, where leaders actively suppress talent around them because it reflects their own inadequacy. It's not just psychological, it's strategic and deeply Machiavellian. In ancient Rome, Emperor Commodus replaced capable administrators with sycophants and entertainers. His court became a hollow shell, more obsessed with pleasing him than preserving the empire. In present-day politics, corporate boards, and institutions across the globe, we see the same decay. Wherever authority is threatened by ability, talent is systematically removed, and mediocrity becomes institutionalized. And that's when the real danger begins. Because now, incompetence isn't just a flaw, it's a feature. It's protected by a carefully constructed ecosystem, a network of codependent weakness. And just like any ecosystem, it resists change, defends itself, and punishes outsiders. So even if someone competent does make it inside, they're quickly silenced or removed. But here's the disturbing part. This dysfunction isn't just the result of bad luck or corruption. It's the natural outcome of how our minds and our societies are wired to respond to uncertainty. Let's go deeper into that in the next part.
Even when surrounded by failure, the incompetent often remain untouchable, not despite the system, but because of it. Our minds aren't just vulnerable to simple narratives, they're wired to seek them out. When faced with chaos, the human brain reaches for order, and the quickest path to order is a confident voice that says, "This is the truth." Machiavelli knew this. In The Prince, he warned, "Men in general judge more from appearances than from reality. All men have eyes, but few have the gift of penetration." And so we return to a brutal truth. Most people do not want to be governed wisely. They want to be governed simply. They want the illusion of safety more than the discomfort of truth. This craving, in psychology, is known as cognitive closure, the psychological need to resolve ambiguity, to cling to clarity, even when it's false. The more uncertain the times, the more seductive the strong man becomes. Political history proves this repeatedly. In moments of crisis, it's not the voice of reason that rises, but the one shouting loudest from the rubble. Complexity is cast aside in favor of clarity, no matter how hollow. Real expertise speaks in probabilities. False prophets speak in absolutes. And so we become seduced not by knowledge, but by the performance of it. It's a tragic irony. The most knowledgeable appear hesitant precisely because they understand the weight of their words. Meanwhile, the least equipped perform certainty with ease. And to a frightened public, performance is all they need.
So what happens once the incompetent gain power? They don't just occupy the throne, they reshape the system beneath them, not through strategy, but through survival instinct. Machiavelli noticed it long ago. When weak rulers ascend, they don't strengthen their court, they hollow it out, because true talent threatens them. And where there is threat, there is purging. The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler
he wrote, is to look at the men he has around him. And here lies the next layer of our unraveling. Incompetence is not passive, it replicates. Imagine a fire that fears water. Rather than strengthening the walls to protect itself, it burns down anything that might put it out. That's how weak leadership survives, by surrounding itself with weaker minds, with yes-men, with mirrors that reflect nothing but loyalty. In modern psychology, this is called competence threatening, a phenomenon where leaders, feeling insecure, avoid hiring talent that could outshine them. It's not just ego, it's strategy masquerading as fear. We see this echoed in history, in declining empires, collapsing corporations, failing regimes, not because there weren't capable people available, but because those people were filtered out before they ever had a chance to speak. The result? A brittle chain of command, a network built not on excellence but on deference, where ideas are no longer tested but affirmed, where mediocrity isn't just tolerated, it's rewarded. And soon, even those who once question begin to fall silent, because in a system that punishes competence, silence becomes survival.
But it doesn't stop at silence. In these systems, something even darker begins to happen. The transformation of loyalty into identity. You see, once incompetence consolidates power, it must protect it, not just from external threats, but from internal awakening. And the best shield against dissent is devotion. Machiavelli warned that men are driven more by fear than by love. In modern terms, insecure leaders don't inspire, they polarize. They craft narratives that turn criticism into betrayal. Dissent becomes treason, and questioning the leader, that becomes a threat not just to the ruler, but to the entire group. Psychologists today call it identity fusion, when followers merge their sense of self with the group or its leader. From that point forward, defending the leader is no longer about loyalty, it's about survival. Because if the leader is wrong, then I might be wrong. And for many, that's too much to bear. That's how charismatic incompetence maintains control, through emotional blackmail disguised as belonging, through the slow erosion of boundaries between belief and being. We've seen it in cults, in politics, even in corporate cultures. The team member who questions a bad decision is accused of not being a team player. The citizen who challenges policy is labeled unpatriotic. The employee who voices concern becomes a problem. It's not logic that holds these systems together. It's fear. It's fusion. And when that happens, reason loses. Because the moment people feel that to question power is to question themselves, the truth becomes irrelevant. Only allegiance remains. And this allegiance, this manufactured unity, becomes the ultimate shield for incompetence. It creates a culture where not only is failure protected, it's rewarded, where the appearance of loyalty is more valuable than actual results, where the leader's confidence is so contagious, even disasters are reframed as victories, as part of the plan. Niccolo Machiavelli understood this illusion well. He didn't write about power as it should be. He revealed how it works in its rawest form. He observed that it's not the truly capable who often rise, but those who learn how to manipulate perception, who know when to lie, when to flatter, and when to silence the wise. And once these individuals reach the top, they rarely climb alone. They bring with them a network of enablers, flatterers, and echo chambers, people who owe their own power to the leader's survival. It's not just corruption, it's codependence. These followers don't challenge poor decisions, they explain them away. They don't confront incompetence, they camouflage it with ceremony, with slogans, with distractions. Every blunder becomes strategic. Every critic becomes jealous. In this theater, truth doesn't matter. Results don't matter. Only loyalty, only noise, only staying in power at any cost. And perhaps the most dangerous part? Over time, even the leader begins to believe it. Surrounded by unchallenging voices and shielded from consequences, their incompetence morphs into delusion. A delusion with authority, a delusion that can shape nations, economies, and lives.
But what happens when this delusion becomes systemic? When entire institutions are shaped not by competence, but by the need to serve and protect incompetence at the top? It doesn't just infect the leader, it corrodes the culture. Accountability vanishes. Feedback becomes dangerous. Questions are framed as disloyalty. And suddenly, the smartest people in the room are silent, not because they agree, but because speaking up has consequences. Machiavelli saw this unfold across monarchies, republics, and courts. He knew that power, untethered from truth, becomes theatrical. Rituals of leadership replace real leadership. What matters isn't doing the right thing, but seeming like the one who is. And so a paradox forms. The more hollow a system becomes, the more aggressively it must perform strength. The more incompetent the leadership, the louder the drumbeat of certainty, because without results, all that's left is spectacle. Think about how often we see this today. Political leaders who double down on lies rather than admit error. Corporate executives who frame losses as long-term vision. Influencers who rebrand mistakes as misunderstood genius. The show must go on. Because if it stops, even for a moment, the illusion crumbles. The crowd sees the wires. The emperor is no longer clothed in wisdom, but exposed in failure. And once seen, it cannot be unseen.
But what, then, is the antidote? If the incompetent rise because they master illusion, how do we, as individuals, resist becoming part of the audience that applauds them? Here, Machiavelli's philosophy doesn't offer comfort, but it does offer clarity. It is not titles that honor men, but men that honor titles. In other words, the power of a role, king, CEO, president, comes not from the title itself, but from the integrity of the person behind it. And that's where change begins. Not with waiting for a better ruler, but by becoming less susceptible to the wrong ones. This demands something deeply uncomfortable, self-awareness. Not the self-awareness we perform in public, but the private kind. The kind that forces us to ask, why am I drawn to certainty? Why do I confuse confidence with competence? Because the truth is, the foolish don't end up in power alone. We let them in. We cheer them on. We forgive what's easy to understand and punish what challenges us to think. Machiavelli didn't write to defend this. He wrote to warn us. to tear down our comforting illusions and replace them with difficult truths. And perhaps the most difficult truth of all, stupidity rises not because it's strong, but because we are weak to it, craving simplicity, resisting doubt, rewarding spectacle. But we can reverse it, with systems that demand transparency, with cultures that reward humility, with individuals who choose discernment over distraction. Because when enough people refuse to be fooled, even the best illusion breaks.